Christina Wiegand, and I am South Atlantic Council staff, and this is a presentation on Coastal Migratory Pelagics Framework Amendment 8, which addresses commercial king mackerel trip limits during Season 2. So here is the Council's amendment process. First, a fisheries management issue is identified, in this case, king mackerel trip limits during Season 2, and once those issues have been identified, the public then provides comments on different ways they feel the Council could address the management need. The Council then reviews all of that input and develops actions and alternatives which will then be analyzed. Currently, the Council has reviewed the analysis on the biological, economic, and social effects of the proposed action and alternatives, and this amendment is being taken out to public hearings, which are held in order to collect more feedback from stakeholders on the current alternative and the Council's preferred, as well as any suggestions for additional alternatives. In addition to these public hearings, a public comment session is always held during the week of the Council meeting in order to address any amendments that are under development. So, once the Council has had an opportunity to review all of the public input, they will modify the amendment as they see fit and then submit it for final approval. And then once the amendment has been sent off to the National Marine Fisheries Service, there are additional opportunities to comment through them. So why is the Council considering action? The current regulations for commercial king mackerel were established in Amendment 26 to the Coastal Migratory Pelagics Fishery Management Plan, and they became effective in May of 2017 and included updated commercial trip limits and new boundaries for the Atlantic Southern Zone. The fishing year for king mackerel runs from March to February, and the commercial quota is divided between two seasons. Season 1 is March 1st through September 30th and has 60% of the commercial quota. And Season 2 is October 1st through the end of February with 40% of the quota. And areas in the Atlantic Southern Zone, which runs from the North Carolina-South Carolina line down to the Miami-Dade Monroe County line, have a different specified trip limit systems. And at the April 2019 meeting, the Council's Macrocobia Advisory Panel, as well as other stakeholders, expressed concerns about the low trip limits during Season 2 that were put into place via Amendment 26, stating that the established 50-fish commercial trip limit makes it challenging for commercial fishermen that are targeting king mackerel south of the Flagler-Volusia County, Florida boundary to earn enough money to pay for the cost of the trip, which is causing undue hardship to fishermen in their communities. And during their meeting, the AP passed a motion asking the Council to consider emergency action to raise the commercial king mackerel trip limit to 75 fish south of the Flagler-Volusia County line for the 2019-2020 fishing season. And during the public comment period that was held at the June 2019 meeting, numerous commercial king mackerel fishermen came out and asked the Council to take emergency action to raise the trip limit during Season 2. And so Council staff presented information to the Council that showed that since the implementation of Amendment 26, the commercial king mackerel Season 2 quota was not being harvested. So based on the input they got from the advisory panel as well as the public testimony they received at the meeting, the Council requested that NMFS implement an emergency rule to increase the commercial triplet for king mackerel from 50 fish to 75 fish for the 2019-2020 fishing season during Season 2, south of the Flagler-Volusia County, Florida boundary. And the Council's goal with this is to reduce inefficiencies, increase economic opportunities, and enhance social benefits. And since the commercial king mackerel landings haven't reached the quota in recent years, the Council and NMFS determined that it's unlikely increasing the trip limit would result in an early closure, and nonetheless, the annual catch limits and accountability measures are still in place to constrain harvest and prevent overfishing if necessary. And the emergency action was approved by the Secretary of Commerce and went into place October 1, but unless modified via Framework Amendment 8, the commercial king mackerel trip limits will revert to what is currently in place, so a 50-fish limit once the emergency rule expires at the start of the 2020-2021 season. So the Council is continuing work on Framework Amendment 8, and here are the current purpose and need statements illustrating why the Council feels this amendment needs to be implemented. So the purpose is to increase the commercial trip limit for Atlantic king mackerel in the Atlantic Southern Zone during season 2, which is October 1st to the end of February, and the need is to provide a commercial trip limit sufficient to support fishing activity and revenue opportunity while constraining harvest to the annual catch limit and providing for year-round access. Currently, there's only one action in this amendment with 5 alternatives, and that action is to increase the commercial trip limit for Atlantic king mackerel in the Atlantic Southern Zone south of the Flagler-Volusia line to the Miami-Dade-Monroe County line, and this is Florida. So alternative 1, which is the current regulations that are in place, not the regulations under the emergency rule, but the ones that are currently codified, which say that from October 1st to January 31st, the trip limit is 50 fish. And then during the month of February, it's 50 fish unless NMFS determines that less than 70% of the season 2 quota has been landed, in which case the trip limit bumps up to 75 fish. Alternative 2 would have the October 1st to January 31st trip limit at 75 fish, and then in February it would remain 75 fish unless NMFS determines that less than 70% of the season 2 quota has been landed, then it bumps up to 100 fish. Alternative 3 puts the trip limit October 1st to January 31st at 100 fish, and then in February the option for a step up to 150 fish. Alternative 4 puts the trip limit at 150 fish for October 1st to January 31st, with the option for a step up to 175 fish in February. And then alternative 5, which is the council's current preferred alternative, is a trip limit of 100 fish from October 1st through the end of February. So there's no option for a step up, just 100 fish for the entirety of season 2. The impact of increasing the trip limit was analyzed using 2 different methods. The first method, which we're calling the low method, assumes that any commercial king mackerel trips that harvested between 25 and 75 king mackerel will now catch the new proposed trip limit, so 75, 100, or 150 fish. Method 2, or the high method, assumes that every trip that harvested anywhere between 1 and 75 king mackerel will now catch the new proposed trip limits. And this analysis was done using data from October 1st to January 31st during the 2017, 2018, and 2018, 2019 fishing years. And as you can see, for the council's current preferred alternative, using the low method, there would be no closure of the commercial sector in the southern zone, whereas with the high method, there would be a closure on January 23rd of the commercial fishery in the southern zone. Here is a quick summary of the effects of the proposed trip limits. In terms of biological effects, they're expected to be minimal because annual catch limits and accountability measures are still in place to take action if the annual catch limit looks like it's going to be exceeded in order to prevent overfishing. In terms of economic effects, generally increasing the commercial trip limit increases landings and dockside revenue. However, some of those positive economic effects may be mitigated if the price of king mackerel drops due to the increase in landings. In terms of social effects, increasing the commercial trip limit is expected to be directly beneficial to fishermen by allowing larger landings for them, increasing their trip efficiency, and increasing the supply of king mackerel to fish houses. Additionally, increased landings can result in higher revenue, which may allow fishermen to begin carrying crew members with them again, which would improve job opportunities. Here is the current timing for this amendment. We are conducting public hearings right now. At their December meeting, the council is going to review this draft amendment and make any modifications that they feel are necessary and consider it for formal review. If the council chooses to submit this amendment to the Secretary of Commerce, that will be done by January 2019 with the goal of getting this implemented before season 2 of the 2020-2021 season begins. There are several ways to provide your comments. First, we're going to be conducting 2 different public hearing webinars, one on October 29th and one on October 30th, both starting at 5 p.m. Please remember that registration is required, and you can register for those webinars at the links provided on the screen. There's also a link to this presentation as well as a scoping summary document on our website. And if you'd prefer to submit written comments, you can do that using our online public comment form. Just remember that the deadline for comments to be included in the comment overview for the December 2019 meeting is going to be October 31st at 5 p.m. If you want to stay connected with the Council, we are all over social media. There's our webpage as well as a link to our Facebook page and our Twitter account. And if you have any additional questions about this framework amendment, please feel free to contact me. My information is provided on the screen. And if you just have general questions about the South Atlantic Council, you're welcome to contact Cameron Rhodes, our Outreach Program Coordinator, or Kim Iverson, our Public Information Officer.